I recently bought an Asgard motorcycle security shed for my two bikes, and while it feels very solid and secure, they don't exactly look the part, and I wanted this to be a place that I can enjoy hanging out in, not just somewhere to keep my bike safe. So in this video, I'll show you the full pimping process, and I'll show you the things I did to make the most of the available space, given this little shed is just 7 foot wide by 11 feet long. The first step then was insulation. The shed does come with ventilation slats on the side and in the roof, but inevitably I found I was getting condensation in the cold in January when this arrived, particularly along the floor on those raised sections that run across the width of the shed. I used this no-nonsense self-adhesive shed insulation and I covered the entirety of the floor, making sure there was overlap between the layers, and I stuck it all down and sealed it with aluminium tape. I did consider other options like spray foam insulation and Celotex, but this stuff was the right mix of me being able to do it myself, not being too expensive, and crucially very thin, so I wouldn't lose space in the shed. The shed came with OSB board flooring, which is raised about an inch off the ground, so it creates a small air gap underneath, which I'm told is valuable for insulation. The floor still gets cold in the winter of course, but I haven't seen any condensation in the 7 months since I installed it. But we're just coming into November as I record this video, so it remains to be seen how well it deals with really cold weather. I fitted similar insulation sheets to the ceiling, but I left the central column exposed as that's where the shed's inbuilt ventilation is, and I didn't want to block that off. The next step was flooring, and I chose these PVC Duramat tiles that are really popular. There are millions of videos showing the full install process, so I'll spare you a 10-minute montage of me bashing the stuff with a hammer, but in short, it's very easy to install, and you just need to make sure you measure the edges very carefully before you cut them. Now, I've seen lots of people install the vent-lock flooring panels that look like they're made up of 4 smaller panels, or the same panels as mine but with alternating colours, and I did consider those options instead of what I went for, but in a small shed like this I thought that the alternating colours would actually make the space feel smaller, and while I think the vent-lock panels would make the space look bigger, there was a good reason I didn't fit them, which I'll explain later. With the insulation and flooring done then, it was time to board up the walls. And I chose plywood mainly because I like the way it looks, which also had the Brucey bonus of meaning that I wouldn't need to bother painting it, and I absolutely hate painting walls. It also helped that plywood is quite a light colour, so it reflects light around the shed well too. Now I bought large plywood sheets from B&Q, which meant I could just give them the dimensions I needed, and they would cut the panels to size in store. Although that actually backfired, and I'll show you a problem that caused in a moment. To fit them to the walls, I used self-tapping screws that drilled into the shed's metal central columns that protrude out where the shed panels meet. And because I am very much the measure once cut twice type, I need all the help I can get to do jobs like this well, so I bought this frickin' laser beam leveler thing that was an absolute game changer. You just point it in the right direction and it throws up a perfectly straight line, and I don't think I would have been able to get this done anything like as well without the laser. Now my original plan with this build was to do everything in order, step by step, and not get too carried away. But that went out of the window when the tool chest I'd seen went on sale at a discounted price. Now if I'm honest, the tool chest was the one thing I was most excited about buying, so it didn't take much to persuade me that the time was right, but having it in place whilst I was still doing work on the shed didn't half make space an issue, and I spent the rest of the build constantly moving it from one side of the shed to the other to get it out of my way. Now a 6-foot chest is way too big for my needs in terms of tool storage, but it looks great being more or less the full width of the shed, and I think a smaller one would have looked a bit disproportionate. After the tool chest had arrived though, this is when I discovered my first problem. The B&Q cutting service is generally absolutely fantastic, and if I'd done all the cuts myself with a circular saw, the cuts simply wouldn't have been as accurate or as straight. However, it turns out that B&Q is not perfect, and they cut one of the panels to the wrong size. I had the dimensions written down, so I know I gave them the right measurements, but I didn't think to take my tape measure with me to check the cuts. So the lesson I learned here was to trust but verify, and I measured all the other cuts B&Q did after this, and to their credit, they got them all right. Now I could have just taken this back and got them to do it again, but that felt like a waste of time and plywood, so I just worked around it and cut a small extra piece to fill the gap. And with my plywood install technique now picking up a bit of steam, the rest of the panels went in much more easily. Now if you were to look closely at the plywood, you'll see that this wasn't a perfect install, and I'm sure a professional would have done a much better job than I did, but I'm really pleased with the way it turned out, and I don't notice any of the imperfections day to day. However, while I was really happy with the way the plywood looked, I wanted something on the back wall to break up the wood look all around the shed and to stand out a bit more, so I bought a bunch of these black brick effect felt tiles. Now these are from Amazon, link below the like button along with everything else in this video, and they just happen to fit perfectly across the back. They are quite expensive though, at £28 for a pack of 12 1-foot tiles, and that's why there's a ruddy great gap in the middle here, behind where the tool chest will sit. Out of sight, out of mind. While 7 1-foot tiles fit perfectly across the full width, I did need to cut the top layer of the brick tiles to size, and I found that they cut really cleanly as long as you use a very sharp knife. I'll show you the finished article at the end, but for now I can tell you that I'm really pleased with the way they turned out, and as a Brucey bonus, they do absorb a bit of sound too, which helps the room feel a bit less echoey. And finally, the reason I chose black tiles instead of lighter white tiles that would have made the room a bit brighter is because you can't see the join on the black tiles, whereas you can with the white tiles, which I discovered when I fitted these white tiles in my home office. Now you would have noticed in the last shot that I put up a pegboard. I decided to go for a large 4 foot wide by 3 foot tall pegboard made up of 3 separate panels. I don't really have enough tools to fill that much space, but a smaller board would have looked a bit odd above such a large tool chest, and I really wanted to have my spanners mounted on the back wall, partly for easy access, but mainly because I think it looks cool. Now one of the problems I was always going to have with this shed was fitting 2 bikes in at the same time. It's only 7 foot wide and the doors aren't full width, so you need to ride the bikes in at an angle, which would then mean that the back end sticks out halfway across the shed. So to get around that problem, I bought 2 motorcycle dollies. They took a surprisingly long time to assemble, but they have been absolutely brilliant. They have casters at the front, middle and rear, so you can manoeuvre the bikes around easily enough, and incidentally that is why I chose the smooth Duramat floor tiles over the textured options. While the dollies are great, any kind of bumps at all do make them quite awkward to move around, so I wanted to make life as easy as possible for them. Now they hardly get moved at all, and I only ever move them about a foot or 2 to the side, but it wouldn't have been possible to fit 2 bikes in this shed without them, and I think these were the single best purchase for this project, certainly in terms of making the most of the limited available space. And in terms of security, I also installed ground anchors at the end of the dollies. They're drilled deep into the concrete base, and I've gone for the Oxford Beast locks, which were quite expensive, but they're about as secure as you can get, so it's probably worth the price. Now that's the bulk of the main jobs done, but there are 2 things left to show you. The first of which is lighting and electrics. The most popular lighting option for garages like this seems to be those hexagonal LED lights, but I didn't like the idea of seeing hexagonal reflections in my bike's paintwork, so I chose these light battens instead. They're modular, so you can fit as many as you want together, and crucially for me, they are also super easy to install. I chose 6 of the 40cm units, which gives me a total of 96 watts of light. Now that's probably overkill, but it makes the room really bright, so overall I think it's worth it. In terms of install, they come with brackets that just screw into the roof, then the lights clip into those brackets and you're done. To fit the light battens together, they have either fixed connectors if you want to join lights right next to each other, or cable connectors so you can work around any blocks. And with these, the other big selling point for me was that they came with a 3-pin plug, so I didn't need to do any wiring. And there's also a switch on the plug cable, which means I have a light switch exactly where I want it, right by the front door. And that brings me on to the rest of the electrics. In terms of getting electricity into the shed, I didn't want to have to dig a trench through my garden and wire the shed to the mains of my house, so I decided to give solar a shot. I have 2 500 watt panels on the roof, and an EcoFlow Delta 3 Plus solar generator inside. The EcoFlow unit is effectively one big battery that stores all of the solar energy created throughout the day, and it has various plug outlets which makes it easy to connect all of the fixtures I wanted. It's only a 1 kWh battery, so I bought an extra 1 kWh battery to give me a total capacity of 2 kilowatts. I never actually use that much in a single day, as all I really have in here is a couple of trickle chargers and the main lights, but the extra capacity does come in handy in the colder months, particularly when there's an extended period of cloud and rain for a few days, which means the battery doesn't get fully charged for that period. The whole system cost me around £1,600, so it was quite expensive, although annoyingly it's come down quite significantly in price since then. But ultimately it would have cost me similar money to have the shed connected to the house mains electric, and I really like that the shed is completely off-grid, so it won't add to my electricity bill, and it won't be affected by power cuts. With all of that done then, the final stage was a few finishing touches. I put up a couple of shelves at the far end, partly for a bit of extra storage, but mainly because I think they look cool, and I have a few pegs on the sidewalls for my various bits of biking detritus. Now because I want to use this as a man cave, not just for bike storage, I also bought this little stool. There isn't really much room for it, to be honest, but having anywhere to sit makes the difference between a space that you want to stay in and a space you don't want to stay in. And I mounted these Ruark Bluetooth speakers on the back wall so I can listen to a bit of music while I fantasize about what bike I'm going to buy next. So here's the finished article then, and I am absolutely delighted with how it turned out. For a small shed, I definitely feel like I've been able to maximise the available space, and aesthetically it is exactly what I had in mind, and I genuinely love just coming in here, sitting on the stool and chilling out. It's not perfect though, and there are a couple of things that I'd do differently if I started again. I chose the grey colour for the floor because I wanted something that reflects light around the shed, given that it has no windows, so no natural light. But in hindsight, it's a bit of a dull gym locker grey colour, and I think black would have actually looked much better and would have hidden the dirt better. The far end of the shed is also currently kind of unfinished, and I haven't decided if I'll leave it like that or do something with it. I really like the idea of covering the space with fake plant tiles, but I haven't been able to find any the right size, so for now it's just staying as it is. And if I'm dreaming, ideally I would have liked the shed to be a bit longer, so there's more space between the bikes and the tool chest, or a bit wider to give me enough space to actually work on the bikes, or ideally a bit longer and a bit wider. And while I am happy with the solar setup, that does mean there's no heating in here in the winter. Although to be fair, even if I'd connected this to the mains, electric heating is pretty expensive to run, so I probably wouldn't have used it much anyway. Now I've tried to cover as much as I can in this video without waffling on about unnecessary detail, but if there's anything you'd like to know more about, let me know in the comment section below. I'll reply to all questions, and if a request is popular enough, I'll make further videos on any specific subjects, so give a thumbs up to any comments you want to see more on. And if you enjoy the video, make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.